Hello, everybody. Here he is, Dennis Harness. I've been waiting to have Dennis on for a really long time because when I first got into the Nakshatras myself, I was looking for information on the Nakshatras and couldn't find it anywhere, and went to a bookshop in upstate New York, not thinking that I would have any chance of finding. Actually, I wasn't even looking for a book on Vedic astrology that day. I just wasn't even thinking I would find it. And there it was on the shelf, a book by Dennis Harness called The Nakshatras, The Lunar Mansions of Vedic Astrology. Is that the name of the book? Yeah. And so I bought it and took it home, and that's where it all started in terms of the Nakshatras. So Dennis, it's an honor to have you on. You're kind of like a teacher to me, yeah? Because your book was the first book on the Nakshatras I ever had. So welcome.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's great to connect with you and look forward to meeting you even more in person in the future. I'm sure we'll get together.
Me too. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about before we came on about just what brought me to the Nakshatras, and first time I ever had a consultation, a Vedic astrology consultation, was 1980. And that was with Chakrapani Lal, who's kind of like my Jyotishi, one of my main Jyotishi gurus, really, like a spiritual father to me. But at that time, because it was an introductory session, he didn't talk about the Nakshatras, but he did an amazing session for me. At that point, it was called Hindu Astrology. And then I was like, fast forward a number of years later, I had kind of was studying a little bit on the side, and I was doing Western astrology. And then James Braha's book came out, Ancient Hindu Astrology for the Modern Western Astrologer. And around the same time, I think it was actually around 87, so his book came out in 86, I was told about the Nakshatras from a woman who was the assistant for a man named Swami Hariharananda, who was a direct disciple of Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru, who Tishi. So she was telling me about how you would match the moon nakshatras for marriage or partnership. And I had just gone through a divorce, so I was looking, for the right woman, and so I would contact her because she said, well, there's this whole point system, this CUDA point system where you compare them compatibility. And so you can get anywhere from basically 0 to 36 points. Actually 4 to 35 is what it really turns out to be. But so I would call her up, and I'm dating some woman, and I would ask her, how many points do we have? And so after about a month or two of this, bothering her, with my problems and like trying to find the flavor of the month. No, I was a good guy.
Speed dating through the stars, right?
Exactly. That's a good way to put it, speed dating through the stars. So after a few times, she just said, I just don't hassle me anymore. Why don't you just go buy the book? And I said, well, what's the book? And she said, it's a little book called Muhurta, or Electional Astrology by B.B. Raman, who is considered the greatest Vedic astrologer of the last century. So I was at the time just starting to do professional readings in 88 at East West Bookshop in Menlo Park, California. It was a really famous bookstore, metaphysical bookstore.
I think they have one in New York City too, don't they? Yeah, East West Books. Sounds familiar.
Seattle, and now there's one. They've moved down to Mountain View, which is in South Bay of San Francisco. Right. But anyway, so I figured I'll order the book, and so I go and talk to the owner of the bookstore, the guy named Lee that manages, taking orders on the books. And I told him the title and everything. And he says, you're going to have to be a little patient. And I said, why is that? He says, well, we order the books from India. And again, this is 1988. He says, but the problem is that it takes sometimes several months for the books to come because they're sent sea freight. Right. And patience is not a great virtue with Mars, Pluto on my ascendant natal. But I figured, okay, I'll give up. I'll order the book, be patient. So that afternoon, I came up from where I was doing these sessions. They called it Readers in the Garden. It was actually Readers in the Dungeon. You had to go down to this little cell to do these sessions. It was great, though. So I come up, and I walk up, and Lee says to me, he goes, didn't you just order this book? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, the freight just arrived today, the whole shipment from India. And whoever ordered the book from the last shipment, we can't get a hold of them. So do you want the book? So kind of like, you know, when the student's ready, the teacher appears or the book appears.
Right.
So that's how I got the book. And so it was about love. So I was trying to, really trying to, after my first marriage crashed and burned in 3 years, you know, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to use a little divine intervention here.
Right.
So that's what kind of pulled me into it. And then, God, I came into contact, like you were saying, with Bipin Bahari's book.
Myths and Symbols of Vedic Astrology, yeah.
And he inspired me so much because he brought in the mytho-poetic level. He was such a great writer, and he was a theosophist.
Yeah.
Amazing man, and I got to meet him several times, and just
wow,
brilliant man.
I mean, if I can touch on that, you know, what I've always found really wonderful about that book is every time you read it, it unveils another layer. Meaning, it's one of those books that's written that way, that it will reveal information when you're ready to integrate that information.
Yeah, and he's got like 3 or 4 or 5 books now that, thank God, I encouraged him to get Lotus Press to publish them, and now they're protected. So Lotus Press out of Twin Lakes, Wisconsin, who did my book, who published my book, has the whole volume. I think 4 or 5 of his books there that people can get. Because to me, he's probably one of the best writers on Vedic astrology, definitely one of my top 5 writers, and just that brilliance because of bringing the connection with the mythology.
Yes.
My big problem with astrology is it becomes what I call digital astrology.
Explain.
Which is absolutely brilliant. You know, it's great to learn all these techniques and have all the sophistication of using, you know, 60 divisional charts and 20 different dasha systems and all these things. I mean, I bow to these people because I'm not that. I'm a Midwestern boy from Kansas City. I'm a psychologist that uses astrology. I know a bit of astrology, okay, I'll grant it. But what I love is the mytho-poetic part of it.
Yeah.
Because the sacred stories, as I like to call them, was really the basis of astrology. Now, the astronomy and the calculation and all that's so brilliant. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just, as I like to say, you have to get off the paper. The paper is important, but the symbol, the story, the metaphor, the parable, to me is what really moves a lot of people. And if you can do both, if you have that brilliance of the analytical techniques and the brilliance of being, I would say, a psychologist, at least a life counselor, I call it kind of like a spiritual life coach is kind of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
You have access to the sacred stories and the symbols, man, then people can really take it, and it can really help someone more than just you impressing them with how accurate you are in prediction.
Right, and you know, and something about the nakshatras too, and the mythology connected to it. When you're using mythology, it's going to mean something very, I mean, you're telling the person the myth, and that's the whole beautiful thing with the nakshatras, especially if you're telling people some of the myths or some of the stories or the connections with the nakshatras. It's going to mean something very specific to them.
Correct.
You know, regardless of what you're communicating to them. I mean, I sometimes tell clients, I say, you know, I'm saying this and you know what it means to you. I'm just, you know, kind of saying it. Yeah.
Beautiful point.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think good astrology, we should be choice revealers rather than choice makers.
Exactly. Yes.
The choice revealing of the story and how those symbols speak to that person is much more important than what I could tell them.
Yes.
Even though I'm trying to kind of point them maybe in this direction. But to me, it's just beautiful. When I teach workshops like the one I'll do in Toronto, what I love to do is interact. I learn as much from my students and my clients than I've ever done from books because they're the ones that are teaching me. And as you said, I mean, being in the trenches is how we learn. My teachers have always said, just jump in there, see people, be humble, share what you can, and then you learn so much from their story.
So Dennis, I want to talk about what you just said, jumping in the trenches and things like that. But while we're on the subject, shall we talk about this this workshop that you're doing in Canada and let the viewers know about it in case some of them happen to be in the area or they want to fly out and everything?
really excited about it. I do love to teach. My problem is that just to have someone organize it like Andrea Oliveira is so sweet, because I just, I'm married with kids and I got a granddaughter now. So, oh my God, I just have a full life in terms of my family. And I love putting on events. But at the end of the day, I'm just so grateful to Andrea to organize this and to have it. I haven't been to her place, but I heard it's just beautiful. It's on Bathurst. It's a real kind of a cool, trendy area of yoga studios, and she does amazing Ayurvedic products. Anyway, long story short, we've talked about it because she's been a client of mine, a friend for about 5 years, and finally she said, well, why don't you come up? I'll host you. So the idea with the workshop is it can be kind of for beginner to intermediate students, because I'm going to run their charts if they sign up for the workshop, and we're going to make it very personal. And just as personal as people want to go. I honor, people's need for privacy, so I don't want to push into something that's not appropriate. But exactly what you're saying, Michael, is I want to hear their story. I will tell them what my understanding and how it spoke to me and my clients. But ultimately, I want to hear how it speaks to them, and how that symbol, that sacred story, and again, calculation and things may really inspire them in their life. And that's to me the most important thing of astrology, is it should inspire people and to help them to take discriminative action in their life.
Exactly. It's about understanding. It's less, I find, about prediction, even though a lot of people like to use astrology for prediction. I often tell people that, sure, prediction's good for treating the symptoms, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned about this. I'm, wondering when this is going to happen, because I'm feeling a lot of pressure to get married, or a lot of pressure to find a job, or a lot of pressure to do this, that, or the other thing. But underneath it all, it's just the individual who's really wanting to be happy and is seeing some stumbling blocks to their happiness. Mm-hmm. If you can find the story that's underneath that, then you're dealing with the cure, which generally the cure involves accepting. Mm-hmm. Accepting, potentially some limitations that are there in your life, but working with those limitations so they're not limitations anymore, so that then they are your prosperity. It's about understanding them and accepting and growing from what you have there. And Dennis and I were talking before we came on about how we both learned about the Nakshatras in a very similar manner, which is talking to clients about experiences in their life and listening to stories. Because ultimately that's one of the things that's very deep about the Nakshatras is there's, as we've been saying, a lot of deep mythology connected with each particular nakshatra, and each nakshatra has a story. Mm-hmm. So each person has a story, and that's why people can relate to it so well.
So I just to finish that about the workshop, it's October 7th to the 9th. It's a Friday night kind of intro thing. People don't have to do the whole weekend if they don't want to. But if they do, then I'll run their chart, and I'll have the charts with me. And then we'll make it very personal as we go through the 27 nakshatras over the weekend. There are 27. It's kind of like the simple way is just to think of it like dividing the zodiac or the pie into 27 segments. I like to call it the primordial level of the zodiac, below that, because it became before the 12 signs.
Yes.
And they're called lunar mansions because the moon basically resides in one approximately 25 hours on average of time, and then it moves on. So it's like, there's all these stories of this one moon god visiting his 27 wives, which represented the different stars in the night sky. And he had one that was his favorite, Rohini, the 4th nakshatra, made the other 26 sisters very jealous. And so he was placed, Prajapati, the father of these 27 daughters. He got very upset because he had 26 daughters that were not happy. Right. So he put a curse on the moon god, and the curse was that the moon would die. And the daughters thought that was a little bit of a harsh curse because they didn't want to lose their husbands. So long story short, he lifted the curse, but he left a partial curse. And the curse was the moon would have to wax and wane. It would have to brighten and darken due to this kind of indiscretion with Rohini, which is she's kind of like the beautiful one. She's connected with the ancient Saraswati civilization, the goddess civilization that occurred around the time of ancient Egypt and Babylonia and the Minoan civilization. So I just love these stories, even how the 27, came about.
Right, exactly.
And it's beautiful because it's just dividing the zodiac into 13 degree and 20-minute segments, just like we have the decans, the 36 decans and Western astrology.
Dennis, I'll share something interesting with you, because the earliest information that I had known about the nakshatras was about writings in the Rig Veda, dating basically 1900 BC. But another person who I interact with, who's very heavily into researching the nakshatras, I forget what archaeological site, but he said that, and he showed me a picture of the coin, that there was some wooden coin that is carbon dated like 4200 BC.
Wow.
That has nakshatra symbolism on it.
Oh my God, I haven't seen that.
So we're talking something very ancient here. Very, very ancient astrology.
Yeah, Dr. Frawley, David Frawley, who's a good friend of mine, and he and I started organizing the international conferences on Vedic astrology back in '91. He was the one that pointed out to me that although the nakshatras were never listed by name until the Atharva and the Ajur Vedas, which were, like 500 or 600 BC, Rig Veda conservatively, like you're saying, some people say 1500, 1800, that's very conservative because it was passed down orally. But what David pointed out, which is brilliant, is that, okay, the nakshatras were all listed, except there were several that were mentioned.
Yeah.
Like Tisha, which is like Pushya, was mentioned. I think Magha, and also there was another one too, Revati, I think were mentioned by name. There were 3 or 4 that were mentioned actually by name, but all 27 of them were mentioned in terms of the deities that represent the nakshatra.
Exactly, right. And that's mainly the text that I'm familiar with. Yeah.
So, and then they got kind of put into these kind of more the 27 segments of the zodiac a little later, but they were still following. Nakshatra means to guard or protect. They're like guardian angels, the deities associated with these. And they're helping us, particularly times of calamity on the planet, like what we've been going through. So they're kind of like heavenly guardian angels is the way I see them. Yeah.
What I like to tell people, and you have to pardon my hand symbolism because I use my hands to kind of describe it. If we look at the planets as being incarnations of Vishnu, right? So here you have incarnations of Vishnu, and nakshatras as being the powers of Vishnu or powers of God given to the individual to grow their relationship to Vishnu beyond the planets. Here you have the individual. Here you have the Rashis. The Rashis on a certain level are like the Maya, right? They're the field that everything is playing out in. But beyond that, you've got incarnations of Vishnu and the powers of Vishnu. And here you have the individual. So we're trying to understand God through this veil of our life.
Beautiful. I like that.
So nakshatras, we're so lucky to have them.
Well, you've probably heard the term Rashi means a mass or a heap.
Exactly. Yeah.
A mass, whereas the nakshatras are, just again, it's further differentiation. And I do, one of the things that I do point out to my students and people taking my classes is that just like with constellations, with Rashis, we also have to be careful in terms of the digital astrology with the nakshatras, because even though we divide them into these nice little 13 degree and 20-minute bundles, which is fine, we are putting an abstract model onto our solar system, into the zodiacal belt, and we have to be careful. So I kind of use a little fudge factor. I always say, if a planet or, the ascendant's like within a degree of the end or the beginning of the next one, it's kind of like nakshatra sandhi. And I say, read about both of these and see. You may find there's a grid there for you. And again, I just, that's where I have a little problem with digital astrology, as I call it, because sometimes it doesn't even look, and just look and see that the constellations, some of them are 40 degrees and some of them are 20 something, you know, in terms of.
Exactly. You can't fit the universe into a box, so to speak, right?
Still, we have to work with this model, and it's a model, and I really honor, I wish I was actually stronger in Ganika, which is calculation and astronomy. It's not one of my strong points, to be honest. So I appreciate that work. Almost I feel like, God, if I could be with a beloved, another beloved astrologer that knew all that, and then, you know, we could kind of work kind of as a tag team, would maybe work the most effectively. But anyway, getting back to my belief system is that we have to be a little careful, because there is this kind of bleed through sometimes in these Sandhi points between the
I find the same thing. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Doug. Yeah, but I completely follow that.
Always, you know, again, like I said, I like to think we have to get off the paper, because again, in India, you know, the original practice of astrology was done in the jungles in Kerala, or at least as far as some of the recorded history of Jyotish. And the reason they did it in the jungle is so they could be open to Nimitta, to omens. And so I always think, if an astrologer, if they can, I didn't have that opportunity in the dungeon at East West Bookshop. I had no windows down there. Really, it was like a Dionysian cellar. You had to go down these stairs. But it was sweet. It was like a little cave, a little monastery. But I have a window here. I've had my office for 20 years in Sedona. And I have a beautiful panoramic view of Thunder Mountain, which I call Mount Kailash.
Nice.
And there's a fire department here. So if the fire engines go off, okay, maybe there's something happening. And the little hummingbirds will come by the plants. So anyway, the point is that in Kerala and in the jungle, you would look and see these omens. And sometimes the omens are just so beautifully intertwined with the nakshatra symbolism. And it's just fun to allow life to come and speak to you, in addition to what's on the paper. And so, but I'm a psychologist by training, so I'm kind of working in a little different way maybe than some astrologers, because, you know, I always say that the problem with astrology and psychology, or the paradox, is astrologers are paid to talk and psychotherapists are paid to listen.
Paid to listen, right.
Sometimes the best thing I can do sometimes is just listen. So. But anyway, I don't know where I'm going with all this, just except to say, maybe I'm a little bohemian. I'm kind of a neo-Vedic astrologer. I kind of think outside the box a little bit. I have a hard time when things get too rigid. And that's just my nature. I'm not putting down people that aren't really tierce like that. It's just I can't, you know, you can't make a tiger into a cow, you know.
Right. But, you know, I'm also, I'm much along the same lines. And I believe, and I state that because I'm stating I believe. And I'm recognizing not everybody is going to believe the same thing, nor should everybody believe the same thing. Yeah. Dharma is ever evolving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's to say that things are going to be one way in your life for the entirety of your life can sometimes be a little bit limiting. And to say, and I completely accept that the comment section of this video may be filled with all sorts of potential flack after I say this, but I'm willing to say that, which is, if you're not willing to take what you have learned through astrology, apply it and integrate it, almost, for lack of a better way to put it, become it, right? Mm-hmm. And then grow it further, right? By testing things out, seeing how things work, learning things yourself aside from the things that you've learned in books, then astrology as a science doesn't grow. Yeah. And I think we need, rather than, and I'll speak this briefly here, which is there's a lot of controversy on some levels in the astrological world because of people going, well, this person uses this set of techniques and says this is right. And this person uses this set of techniques and says this is right. And for the beginning student, that's the most confusing stuff in the world, to understand how everything can be right.
Right.
simultaneously. Right? It just creates a lot of confusion. And so it creates a lot of controversy amongst people. But if we all put the controversy between, oh, well, I'm right and that person's wrong, or this person's right and that person's wrong, if we put all that behind us, there's so much we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
So much.
I mean, that is the love of, I started organizing the conferences, as I said, with Dr. Frawley back at Dominican College, actually in San Rafael, California.
Wow.
Was our first in 92, and B.V. Raman was our guest of honor from Bangalore, India, and it was incredible. And I had the good fortune of doing that for years, and just actually had one in November here in Sedona. We had like 30 speakers and about 200 attendees, and it was lovely.
I remember last year, I wanted to be there so badly.
I just love bringing people together, and exactly what you're saying. I love people that are east-west in their approach, that are open. You know, it's not that Vedic astrology is so wonderful. The thing I love about Vedic astrology, of course, my gurus, Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar, and that lineage, but I am biased, spiritually speaking. But the thing I love about it is it is connected up with Ayurveda. It is connected up with Vastu. It is connected up with Raja Yoga, with chanting mantras.
It's a yoga itself, yes.
Integrative system, which what happened in Western astrology, which is kind of sad, is it got ripped apart by Christianity and fundamentalist Christianity and a lot of other things in the scientific revolution and a lot of other things that came in, which is part of that dharma, but you know, it's been piecemealed back together. Right. And if you look at ancient Hellenistic astrology, it's much similar to Vedic astrology than it is to modern astrology, Western astrology. And I love all the systems. I have had amazing sessions with like Robert Hand and Alan Okun and some of the most amazing. Dimitri George was my business partner for years, you know, and we would take people on tours to Greece and India and Egypt and do both charts. Because, you know, it's just like, to me, it's so humbling to think, you know, that we know it all. Because and this is a little Midwestern humor here, but it's usually when someone acts like they have their shit together, they're usually standing in it.
Exactly, right.
So I find it very humbling, very humbling. And even though I love the Vedic system, for me, that's my cup of tea, literally, you know, where I enjoy. But man, I have to say, honestly, one of the best sessions I ever had in my life, hands down, was by a Chinese astrologer from Hong Kong, speaking in Mandarin, through an interpreter, chain smoking Lucky Strike cigarettes.
Yep.
You know? And it was brilliant. So it's like, I've been so humbled, you know, through my life, in terms of, especially when I think I kind of know it, you know, it's just like, get humbled. And the thing is about, to me, astrology, it can't be divorced from the fine arts and the culture and all the things that are going on and the sociological factors that are playing into it, besides the individual chart. You're born and you have a great chart, and say you're born in Syria right now, you may not fare that well. That chart may not fully manifest. So there's a whole social aspect that sometimes we have a hard time seeing unless you're really an expert in mundane astrology. Sometimes it's really hard to see certain things. And my wife calls me a Midwestern mystic because I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. I'm from the Midwest. And I like to say, you know, common sense is allowed.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in Sedona.
Exactly. You know, and interestingly enough, too. Well, I'll share something with you. I'm your brother from down south. I grew up in Arkansas.
Okay, so my family lives in Branson, so pretty close.
Exactly. But you know, interesting too is when common sense meets astrology. I was just doing a talk with another astrologer recently, and I'm actually going to have him back on Wednesday, Vic DeCara, and we were talking about simple astrology, learning the planets simply, rather than, you know, getting lost in the complexities. And when common sense meets astrology, you can have some pretty amazing things that go on. And you don't have to, like, you know, go into all these deep techniques. And if you like deep techniques, because, you know, sure, myself, I like simple astrology, but I also like deep techniques. But I like it when simple astrology meets deep techniques, because that's when the beauty of it really happens. But sometimes you can get so lost in techniques that the answer is staring you right in the face.
Yeah.
And you're not seeing it because you're looking for something complex.
Well, you know, Carl Jung said it very eloquently. He said the symbol is the chief mechanism for transforming consciousness. And I think we do our job. I feel like I do my job fairly well. If within that hour and a half that I'm with a client, if I can kind of present maybe 5, 10, okay, let's just say 10 salient points, and maybe with some of them a symbol attached to them, either a sacred story, as I like to call them, rather than myths, because I consider them real. Like myths, sometimes we think of it as like not true. So, or a symbol, or, you know, a metaphor or something. You know, it's kind of like NLP, you know, or what was it? Ericksonian hypnosis, where a master would just use a symbol or a parable, and it would change the whole consciousness of the person. And, you know, there's an alchemy going on when we're doing sessions where I'm getting healed by the, quote, the client.
Most definitely.
Alchemical dance that goes on, which to me, when I'm in that space, then it's just so much enjoyment and really, you know, tears come to the eyes, and the feelings of deep, deep emotional love start to happen in the room. And so to me, astrology needs to always stay centered in the heart too.
Exactly. Sure.
Where I get into a little bit, it's really kind of putting myself down a bit too, is when I get too digital for me. And I mean, God, I'll have friends of mine that are can just run circles around me in terms of their ability to do really depth techniques. But when I find an astrologer that has that knowledge but comes from the heart and comes from love, it just changes the whole dynamic. Because, you know, you could tell someone that's the total truth, but if it doesn't help them to change, then what good is it? It's just like,
exactly.
You know, insight does not necessarily lead to behavior change. So again, as astrologers, I think we need to leave our clients with a sense of faith and hope and optimism. Point out the challenges. You don't want to sugarcoat something so much where you're cheerleading them off a cliff.
Exactly.
At the same time, when you start presenting things that there are difficulties right off the bat, I think it's really better to accentuate the positive to start with. That's my approach, to build a foundation of positive self-regard and self-esteem. And then the way you word things is so important, especially the challenges, because sometimes a person will take away one, quote, critical comment you make if you're not doing it in a way that's kind of, I don't know, empowering to the person. They'll take that and run with it, and they'll ruminate on that one sentence you said for 10 years.
Yes.
You know, like for example, you have K2 in the 5th house, so you have a curse on you, so you'll never have a child. To a woman.
I am never a big fan of people saying things like curse or yes, exactly.
Well, it's not that there isn't a challenge and a struggle, and this woman I know had a couple of miscarriages, but she said the problem is, and this was a very good astrologer, and again, this is what she got from it. So I'm not saying he necessarily said that. So she said, I said, well, she came to me for a session. I said, well, what's the issue? And she says, well, the problem is I'm pregnant. And I'm 3 months pregnant. She said, well, what should I do? And she said, I said, well, have the baby and then take a picture of the baby and give it to the astrologer.
There you go.
I mean, just that I was being a little, whatever, too much. But, you know, the idea was just stay the course, and, you know, and she had the baby, beautiful baby and all this. But, you know, we can't play God or goddess with people.
No, and you shouldn't. It's
we have to be
it's disempowering to the client. It's disempowering to the client.
And at the same time, turn the coin up, because there's always these paradoxes. I'll have a client that'll come to me, and she'll have had, say, several miscarriages, an abortion. Say she has K2 in the 5th house, and the positor of K2 is Mars in the 8th. So it doesn't look so great, and Jupiter, say, is debilitated or some challenge with Jupiter with children. So there's like 3 or 4 factors that are saying this is tough. And this woman's, let's just say she's 48, and she's having a lot of shame and guilt around the fact that she hasn't had a child.
Right.
So in that situation, because it is kind of situational ethics, I may say to her, I won't say that you had a curse on you. I'll just say it did show in your chart that there were some challenges in this area, and there was like a flashing yellow light in that area of your life. And so maybe you kind of dodged the bullet by not having children this lifetime, biologically. And yet you're a mother to many, and you've got nieces, or, you know, you've got students or clients or people that you've mothered. And so maybe just didn't need to come through that way. So it's kind of like you can take these things and what we would call in psychology, reframe them so that they're empowering. And then sometimes we'll tell a woman that, and then like years of guilt and shame around not having a child, or maybe that she had an abortion and she felt a lot of shame around that.
Right.
That to me is, again, therapeutic astrology. And that's what I strive for. And it's not that I don't make mistakes, that I don't, you know, mess up how I word things, you know, but I just ask, you know, that I try to say things with, as Buddha would say, right speech, where it will have a healing effect, hopefully, you know.
I'm a strong believer too. I think there are some astrologers who overstep the boundaries, and they have not been asked to pull information from a chart.
Yeah.
They'll start bombarding the person with information that person may not want to hear, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not helpful. We should always follow the lead on that level of our clients. What are they looking for information on? So if they're asking, you know, if they're looking at, sure, what is the potential for me to, let's use having children. What's the potential for me to have children in the next year and a half? They're not asking you, am I going to have children in my lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
They're not asking you what the pregnancy is necessarily going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking you, what is the chance of having children? And like you said, you should always frame it in the most positive manner. But in addition to that, if you start going into all the problems with the pregnancy, or you, I see you having one child, but this other child down the line may have this problem, you're putting so many conditions on the person's life. And in essence, we're here to experience consciousness. We're here to grow through all of these experiences, and to interfere in somebody interacting with their own destiny in that manner, it just, yeah, it creates a block.
Yeah, I call it the 3 Ds. I try ethically to stay away from predicting death,
Yeah.
divorce, and disease.
Mm-hmm.
More Ds than that, but those are the 3 big ones for me. Because I think when we start doing that, we have to be careful, because we are playing God or goddess with our clients. And like you said, it's the wise shaman or astrologer who knows when not to speak and not to share certain things.
Yeah.
Maybe inappropriate, like you said. It needs to be syntonic with their state of consciousness where it works. Otherwise, you know, you could impress them, but you may end up hurting them in the process. One of my teachers, Swami Prajnaananda, who is a direct disciple of Hariharananda, this great astrologer, amazing astrologer, who did a session for me, which was a whole other experience, which was, he just read me like a book. He's from India. He was Sri Yukteswar's direct disciple who took over the astrology. He called it stellar astrology.
Right.
But Swami Prajnaananda, after Hariharananda died in 2002, saw Swami Prajnaananda a few years later, and I asked him the question. I said, what do you think about astrology? And he says, well, you know, I love astrology because my guru is an astrologer, you know. He said, but the problem with astrology is that it can create fear. And this is a big shadow side of it, because good astrology should not create fear. Now, maybe, again, we're using terminology here. It may be good for it to create concern.
Right.
You know, like if I have a client comes in and they've got Sun debilitated in Libra in the 8th house, and the ruler of the 4th house of heart, or if you use 4th house's heart, is, say, really challenged and combust the sun or something. Mm-hmm. Persons in their 40s, I may say to them, you know, probably good to go get a real complete physical this year, because they're going into Sun Dasha. So sure enough, I did this with one of my clients a year later, came back, and he had a stroke. And he said, I wished I would have listened to you and got my physical exam.
Mhm.
Now, I could have messed that one up because I could have been even more pushing towards that. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, maybe I should have pushed harder in terms of that, for him.
Mhm.
But sometimes we don't know how these things play out. I mean, it could have been his father died, so, because son is father. And so it's this tricky thing with playing with this. And so I think this is where really the grace of God and Goddess, and when I get still and I'm really doing my better work, I feel like Sri Yukteswar or Hariharananda whispers in my ear. Or they kind of put words. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you mean, because you, as an astrologer, Ernst Wilhelm, another really wonderful astrologer, was talking about how astrology, or going to an astrologer, is also called Deva Prashna, connecting, consulting with the gods, so to speak. So the astrologer is acting as that conduit.
Correct.
At that time.
Good term. Yeah.
That's both an honored place to be in for the astrologer, but it's also a responsibility.
Yeah, I wrote an article on my website, just dennisharness.com, called Vedic Astrology and Transpersonal Counseling. And I published it in different journals, like the Astrological Magazine in India and a couple other journals. I can't remember even which ones, but the idea is there's one chapter in that article called The Astrologers Shadow. And it talks about all the issues that come up in dealing in a private practice, seeing clients. And one of the biggest astrologer's shadows is arrogance and pride. And that especially, it's interesting, when you're doing really good work and you're just nailing things, and you got a great week going, then that inflation, that narcissism, that whole, thinking that you're God. I mean, we all are on one level, God and Goddess, I get it. But still, we have to be careful of what I call spiritual bypassing.
Exactly.
Where we go beyond our it's kind of like Prometheus bringing fire to earth. We have to be a little careful, because even the gods and goddesses get a little jealous if we try to usurp too much. So it's kind of a funny little paradox, strange paradox that we run into with our own egos, trying to keep our own egos in check in a good way. Still not self-effacing, being too harsh on ourselves, but also just humility, confidence, but humility to me is like, God, that is one of the strongest ways to be in the world. So it's just to be confident, know your skill set, know what you can do, and then open to the beauty of the moment, the present moment, and then just stay humble.
You're saying that, and I'm thinking of two key words that, and I may be wrong about the second one, but I don't think I am, but two key words that if people would explore, what's the word, etymology, like the roots of the word, so to speak. And one is humility, which is from the Latin word humus, which means earth.
Oh, yeah.
Being close to the earth. So people feel humiliated, they think it's a bad thing, but actually it's not. You're being brought closer to the earth. And then there's prosperity, which everybody always thinks, money. But prosperity is pro, and spero, which is, I think, Latin for spirit, that which is beneficial for the spirit. So quite literally, you cannot encounter anything in life that is not prosperity. Dhanishta Nakshatra, I'll mention that to you. Dhanishta Nakshatra, you're born, so you're prosperous. And that's one of the messages behind Dhanishta Nakshatra for people, who may not know about that. But those two words are just really powerful. And the more humble you are, the more prosperous you become.
Oh, that's true. Princess Diana, talking about Dhanishta Nakshatra, her moon was in, I think, early Aquarius, if I remember correctly. And she, just what a heart of gold, and how her, in a way, even though she had all these riches and everything, what really made her prosperous was her giving to people less fortunate. So always being there, and as you know, I mean, gosh, she's so revered throughout the whole world forever. But it wasn't just all the opulence, even though she did dress nicely, I have to admit. She had a very beautiful, just so beautiful, and all the Venusian things we think of, but the most beautiful thing to me about her was how she really shared her not only material prosperity, but her prosperity of influence that she had on the world, and how she took that and just, you know, was able to give back. And that to me is probably one of the greatest remedial measures we can do, besides gems and this and that. All these things are lovely and all these wonderful
Service.
pious, but is service and charitable, and even raising money for charitable, educational, and spiritual endeavors like prosperity on a material plane level. If you're a steward for that and use it in a great way, oh my God, that is brilliant. If it's your dharma to do that, it's wonderful. But I love linguistics and just what words mean. And to me, that is also the beauty, you know, of Sanskrit, you know, which is kind of considered the mother of all languages and all the roots, but Latin and all these languages. It's just so beautiful, because I think of good astrology, we should be like bilingual, trilingual.
Well, yeah.
And we should, like, you know, the term, like you're saying, the roots of these words are so powerful.
Well, I often tell people, you know, okay, well, I don't, what is it? Is it dodeca for 12?
Uh-huh.
We actually, if you're looking at the Rashis, you have to be dodecalingual, because you have to know how to speak to somebody who's an Aries ascendant. You have to know how to speak to somebody who's a Taurus ascendant. If you're looking at the nakshatras, that's a whole other level. You have to know how to speak to 27 different, you know, personalities. And so you do really have to be multilingual with that. You do. Because you're talking to somebody different in every single scenario.
Well, as you know, these 27 nakshatras, there's 4 segments called padas, which means like a foot, or, you know, feet. But if you multiply the 27 times 4, of course, it's 108, which is the number of beads on the mala.
Right.
And I think it's the distance between the Earth and the Moon, and then the Earth and the Sun, or something. It's 108 times more. There's all these, you know, things about 108, you know, in terms of spiritual mathematics, really, and galactic mathematics, so to speak. But one of the greatest things about the 108, which I love, because I'm a big baseball fan. You know, I grew up in Kansas City. My Royals have won the World Series last year. They've been in the last 2 years. Okay, enough bragging about that. 30 years we had to wait. But on the baseball, there are 108 stitches.
Oh, are there?
You know why there's 108 stitches?
Why is that?
Because Abner Doubleday, who at least was given the credit for inventing baseball, was into Madame Blavatsky.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Created baseball, so it'd have 108 stitches. There would be 9 innings, 9.
Wow.
Players, you know, would be a diamond consciousness. So that's why it became America's pastime, because actually, even though it's really boring, and I love baseball because I can read a book and watch the game and not miss anything.
Right.
But the other beautiful thing about it is it has some of these deeper spiritual roots that people don't know about the founders of it. And so it's funny how even the most mundane of things, sometimes you'll find these connections with the 108 or the 27 or the 1320, which 13 degrees, 20 minutes, 1320 in the Mayan culture are magical numbers, 13 and 20. And the sun resides into a nakshatra for approximately 13 days. So 13 becomes a very magical number too. So anyway, I love numerology, and there's a whole Vedic numerology system, of course, that was popularized by Harish Johari. But to me, the numbers connected, the 27, again, is a 2 and a 7, which is 9. So these magical things happening with the nakshatras that are brilliant, just wonderful. And that's why to explore them, it's like going into a different land. It's like visiting some ancient civilization in Samaria or some ancient civilization in Sri Lanka. Mm-hmm. Explore these nakshatras. I had a friend once, and she said, "Oh my God, Dennis, I had a dream last night." She goes, "What was it?" She goes, "I got lost in a nakshatra." I hope it was a good one.
Right, exactly.
But you know, it's funny when you start encountering these, as you know, it's like life starts coming up and speaking to you. Mm-hmm. There is a Nakshatra deck put out by Roland de Loof out of the Netherlands, where there's 27 cards. And what you can do is just set one of the cards on your altar for the moon nakshatra of that day, and use it as kind of a, you know, again, like a tarot card, really.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't know that, because that's something I would actually recommend to people who are in my classes, because I'm actually presently running a class where I'm teaching the nakshatras, and so I've just been telling them to focus on the nakshatra of the day. But even if there's a deck, it makes it so much better, because then they.
And what could be really cool, which is what Andrea's doing on Facebook, is she's drawn, I think it's hers doing it or someone, art renderings of the nakshatras. So she's doing a nakshatra day on her Facebook. So if you go on and Facebook her, Andrea Olivera, Olivera, I think.
REA, I think is her
Yeah, yeah. Well, you could maybe post it or let people know. But anyway, she's on. She's been doing that. So what she's got, Michael, is these visuals. Besides a little description of like today was Bharani, and she's doing that work. So it's, I don't know. I just found it kind of fascinating, because I think, again, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Exactly. Yeah.
To have a symbol with it is really great.
I wanted, we were touching on something earlier, and I kind of want to backtrack with that, which is, I think it's good for astrologers to listen. And I think that not enough astrologers do listen. And I actually find, especially when you're working with the nakshatras, listening is such a great thing, because, and even if you're not working with the nakshatras, if you listen to what your client might be reflecting back to you about what you're saying, they're going to mention certain key things that will clue you into other things to look at. Mm-hmm. And the deeper and so I'm also sharing this for the benefit of people who go to have an astrological consultation too, which is sometimes it's a good idea to share and to not just connect to the consultation to have somebody tell you everything, because the more willing you are to reflect back to the astrologer, the deeper you're able to go together. And you can get to some pretty deep places with astrology if you're willing. And some people, they're not, in that space, and that's understandable too, because they're just not ready to do that. But for a client who's ready to go to some pretty deep places in terms of understanding the work, if you go into that reflection and communication back and forth, you can get to some pretty deep levels of the story or the drama that's underneath the person that you're talking to. And equally, something you were saying about how us as astrologers get healed, because that's so very, very true. We get reflected back to us, something that we're going through ourselves through the interactions of our client. And I was mentioning this in the recent video I did with Vic, which is a wonderful book. And it's one of those wonderful books that you find in like a dollar bin, if you know what I mean, by Sant Kirpal Singh. And it was called The Crown of Life. And I can't remember the exact wording, but I can paraphrase basically what he was saying, which is, just as we look at things and we see objects because light is reflecting off of the object and reflecting back to our eyes so we can see something. Similarly, we encounter consciousness because the light of pure being is reflecting off of what is obstructing our experience of pure consciousness. And so we experience consciousness in that way. So the astrologer sitting in the chair is learning things from their client, and the client is learning things from the astrologer, and we're all just kind of involved in this really great dance, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's just pretty phenomenal.
Well said. Yeah, it is. It's like a flawless mirror. We're kind of back each other. And so many times, as I'm sure you have, and again, we have to be careful not to project too much of our stuff onto our clients either. But
exactly.
So often there's something I've just kind of maybe worked through. Yeah. And then it comes, and maybe I can give them a handout or refer a book, like you said, or something that may be a little bit of a thread out of the labyrinth for them. Yeah. Helps them to navigate out, which is, or vice versa. They may come and they may be this great nutritionist that shares something with me about something that I need to shift in terms of my diet, and just beautiful, the dance. I'm reminded what Carl Jung said. He said it very eloquently. He said, you know, the gods and goddesses no longer live on Olympus. They live in our bodies, or excuse me, they live in our minds as complexes, like psychological complexes, in our bodies as disease. So he said the goal of archetypal therapy, which we could say archetypal astrology, is to feed the gods and the goddesses, friend the deities. And that, of course, they're all within us, but they're also, you know, it may be great to have a picture of Durga on your altar if you're working with trying to become more of a spiritual warrior or warrioress. It could be good to have a picture of Saraswati, you know, if you're working on music or learning or trying to flow with life more. And so to me, what Jung was always trying to do was to help the client get in touch with what sacred story or archetypal myth are you playing out this lifetime. And of course, it could be more than one, but which one is the thread that's going to take you out of the labyrinth? And that is only something that the client, as you said, can answer that question.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes the greatest thing we can do as astrologers is just to help the client, as I think it was Rilke said, the poet Rilke, the writer, said, to stand in the question. And you can live into the answer.
Yeah.
Especially
can you say that again? I heard what you said, but it's just very deep, and so I think there's a need to repeat it.
It was Rilke. It's a beautiful passage in one of his poems because it talks about exploring these different rooms, and it's the mystery. You just don't know. And so he's one of the main lines is to stand in the question, and then you may be able to live into the answer. Because if you try to make the decision prematurely, if you're not clear, I think it's when in doubt, wait it out, is what I say to clients. Just be patient, wait. Let it itself. And I think as astrologers, we get into this job, at least I do, what I call it Mr. Fix-It.
Yeah, you're just making me think about something. Go ahead, then.
I want to fix things because I don't like to see people hurt, and probably because of my own pain. I don't want to see myself hurt. So I want to go in and fix things.
Yeah.
Sometimes really, even though that can be really have good intention, sometimes the greatest thing I can do is, like you're saying, is just listen.
Yeah.
Be still.
Yeah.
And be there really compassionate.
And
ultimately, with students as well as clients, if they can discover the answer, so much more empowering than if I. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and two things came to mind from my own personal experience with that, which is I'm never a big fan of just let it go. Well, no, because you'll let it go when you're ready to let it go. When you're ready to process through it, you will naturally let it go. And so I've never liked that particular phrase. Neither have I completely appreciated people who, or not necessarily people, but the phrase, I should just forgive this person, or I forgive this person, because forgiveness is not up here. Forgiveness is here. Just as letting go is here. And you can tell yourself, I let go. You can tell yourself you forgive somebody, but until it happens here, you're not doing either the person you forgive a service or what you're trying to let go of the service until you've let it go here.
I agree.
And you got to go into that process in order to let that go. So as astrologers, you know, we may be able to see some things objectively. And I think that this is one of the difficult things, is we can see objectively the experience. We can sometimes see the evolution of the experience and where it's going. But to take the experience away from the client, is not something really that I think astrologers should try to do, nor is it really something that we can do, because that person's experience is theirs.
Yeah, I mean, that's my edge that I've been really working on as a professional astrologer, that I'm really working on, is the whole thing of being able to let go of Mr. Fix-It. Because that can sometimes really get in the way of really good therapeutic work. By, again, just kind of maybe pointing the person in the direction, but letting them experience the self-discovery, the aha, the peak experience. then I feel like even more, the work can be more profound.
Yeah.
You know, and they take it away from me. It's, oh, that's not just this astrologer told me this or that and whatever, and I'm going to follow this. They go, no, I had this discovery, this epiphany. Now, can I put it into practice?
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, doesn't lead to behavior change necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So for them to take it, and if they discover it, I think it's so much more likely that they're going to be able to put it into practice in their daily life.
Exactly.
So it's interesting, fun. I mean, that's why I'm working on a trilogy called the Karmic Code. And a big part of it is about the struggle and the understanding of the paradox of fate, destiny, and free will. And
hey, Dennis, we lost the connection here for a moment.
No worries.
You were talking about fate, destiny, and free will. I can actually splice this back in.
Yeah, and it's just basically, I think that's talking about standing in the question. I mean, I think that's what all of us, you know, particularly astrologers, we're having to stand in that question of holding that paradox. And I guess where I was going with all that is just, again, just revealing choices rather than making choices for clients, and being
Exactly.
really being there is really I see it kind of like a spiritual life coach, that we're really trying to motivate our client, you know, or ourselves as well, to make change in our life, to take the analysis, take the insight from the head, like you said, move it into the heart and move it into action.
Right.
Because to me, ordinary men and women dream, great men and women act. You know?
Exactly. No, and I've always come from the school of your experience is going to be your best teacher.
Yeah.
Experience something is going to be your best teacher. The best way you can teach somebody something is to not give them all sorts of things to memorize, but is to give them an experience of something.
Yeah. You know,
So,
one of the things I recommend that was taught by one of my main teachers, Angela Arian, who's from the Basque region. She was a cross-cultural anthropologist. Joseph Campbell was her guru and mentor. She was got her degree at UCLA.
well, while you're saying that, I had two contacts in upstate New York who were students of Joseph Campbell, and also Jungian psychotherapists. So I've been appreciating the talk along those lines too. Yeah, myth is quite powerful stuff. Yes, but anyway, continue.
This cross-cultural thing is what I love. Really, I'm a cross-cultural astrologer. Really, at the end of the day, even though Vedic's my thing. So Angie, she's from the Basque region of the Pyrenees, between France and Spain. And one of the things that she taught me, she was one of the most amazing teachers I ever met in my life. She taught me Tarot and the symbolism of particularly the Crowley deck, or she called it the Frida Harris deck, who was the Egyptologist that actually painted the pictures for Crowley. But one of the things that she said, which I use a lot with clients, is, and it's kind of tied into numerology. What's your birthday, Michael, if you don't mind me asking?
11th of April.
11th of April. Okay,
yeah.
So 11, which is, of course, as you know, a master number in numerology. So the idea is that she would say, on the 11th of each month, give yourself a gift of something you've never done, but that should be pleasurable, healing, and revitalizing. So by this time next year, you'll have given yourself 12 gifts of new experiences. And it's just a sweet thing. And it was out of the Basque region, you know, that they taught that, because it was like trying to get people to open up to the freshness of life.
Exactly.
And these things into action. So sometimes I'll just give these homework assignments. I call them homework assignments. I say, but this maybe is a fun homework assignment you may enjoy. And, you know, whether people follow through or not, I don't know. But the idea is, again, just to kind of get us all to kind of, you know, think outside the box and to experience life in a fresh way. And but I know our discussion about the nakshatras, and we've meandered.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, it is what it's supposed to be, and talks take on a life of their own. And it's been a very wonderful talk. But I did want to say, do you have, in summarizing things, what would you like to share with everybody, or what would you like to leave everybody who's watching this with tonight?
Just to realize again that the basis of really astrology are the sacred stories, the mythology. And I think in this day and time, and I have a PhD in counseling psychology. I always jokingly say, don't hold that against me. But I think we need to move from psychopathology to psychomythology.
Yes.
That is the pill, in a way, the holy grail that some of us are looking for, is to find the song or songs that our soul came here to sing.
Exactly. Right.
The chart can be the astrology combined with the mytho-poetic and just, you know, linguistic work and all the things, and just the presence of love and power of love to heal, to me is the beauty, in a way, of, and you said it very well, to really to be so grateful that we get to do this work and we get to do this dance with quote our clients and students is a great blessing. And so I just, you know, and again, we'll probably have a very small group, 15 to 20 people in Toronto. But if you want to learn more about the nakshatras on a personal level, come up and see us, you know. And then I live in Sedona, and, you know, I'm good, I'm game. I go to England a lot and teach, but just somebody has to organize it. And actually, my way of teaching is just very personal, and I like to make it, like you said, very interactive.
Exactly.
I like to have a dialogue. I like to be, how would we say, rather than the sage on the stage, I would prefer to be the guide on the side.
Yep.
So hopefully,
very well put.
Toronto, and look forward to be continued with you, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful talking to you. Can you tell people your website so they'll know where to find you and read more about your work?
Really simple. It's just Dennis, just DENNIS, and then harness, like on a horse, HARNESS.com.
Excellent.
And then my email is just dennis@dennisharness.com.
Excellent. Thanks, Dennis, for being here, and thanks for giving time to talk tonight. I've enjoyed it wholeheartedly, and I'll have to find a way to make it to that side of the globe. And
anytime you
connect with you in Arizona.
I enjoyed our hour together. It's really lovely.
Oh, me too. Take care, and take care, everybody. All right. Namaste. Bye now.
Bye-bye.